Check it out. I love it.
That's Moses, stupid.
Compare me to my mother.
What's good? God is good. I'm your host, Jay Did It. Welcome to Thursday Therapies, a podcast for all creatives, writers, rappers, poets, artists, activists, community therapies, Sacramento community therapy session. Today I have Mack, a local abolitionist and anti-fascist community organizer and artist. They have spent the better part of 20 plus years creating. They have helped build platforms from underground music venues all the way to organizations like Decarcerate Sacramento, the Sacramento Valley Tenants Union, and Mental Health First. Their art mediums include clay, mixed media, spoken word, screen printing, and guerrilla art installations. Mack, co-host of First Church of Poetry. They are involved with and hold workshops for the Sac Poets Society. Mack believes much of our life is a human right, and when coupled with their spirituality, they believe our purpose here is to really actualization, be able to experience all things and engage in creation. It's part of what led them to the fight for liberation and has brought them here today. Welcome, Mack. How you doing? How you doing? I hope I didn't mess all that up.
No, not at all.
I'm just
Honestly, and I'm sure throughout this conversation we might touch back on these things, like even the decarcerate Sacramento.
Right.
That's a brand new word.
Yes.
Actually, on your phone, it wants to spell check.
Right.
And be like, this isn't right.
Right.
Because we're so used to incarcerating.
Right, exactly.
We don't know how to not do that.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah. No, I think you did great. I'm doing great.
Right,
I'm excited to be here.
yeah.
And we'll just check in. I know we'll go over some of this.
Right,
stuff.
yeah.
Cool.
How's your week going? How's your weekend? How was your weekend? How's your week? How's everything going with you? I know you said you've been sick for the past couple weeks before this week, and
yeah, it's been nice because I was sick for a lot of April, and so I was like in my room kind of by myself stewing, and so it's been nice to get back out because it's spring.
Yeah.
I'm like really excited. This week I've been kind of catching up on a lot of projects. I have a lot of cool projects we're going to launch soon, but
nice.
I think some of the cool stuff I've done this week is I had a friend who had a birthday. Shout out to a dope poet in Sacramento, Joe.
Yes, that was amazing. I was there too.
Yeah. That was fun.
It was fun.
Screamed Cardi B with my whole ass
on the mic,
my whole chest for 10 minutes.
Right.
And then this morning we had First Church of Poetry with another amazing Sacramento artist named Natachi Mez.
Nice.
Shout out to that and the message you brought
Natachi,
today
yes.
to the First Church of Poetry. So it's been good. I'm excited to be here.
That's good. I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. That stuff takes a toll, on you physically, mentally, spiritually.
Right. So, as you know, this is a Thursday Therapies, a discussion on mental health awareness. I just want to ask you some questions, have a conversation with you, and get your outlook on mental health.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
It's
I'm really
all good.
excited.
Okay, cool. So, my first question is, when did you become aware of mental health, and how old were you?
Oof. Well, as I know mental health and what it is today, I think that journey started maybe 6 to 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But the truth is trauma and the things that come from, trauma, from folks with trauma, out traumatizing the world. Mental health has been a part of my whole life. For example, my grandfather has schizophrenia. My mother has schizophrenia. My sister has schizophrenia. I've dealt with a lot of in our growing up time, substance use and personality disorders and poverty and violence.
Yeah.
So I think my awareness of the world around me and what's going on was my whole life.
Yeah.
But my understanding of it, with the comprehension I have today, really probably began about 6 to 10 years ago.
Wow. So you've been dealing with this your whole life, and did your family know exactly? There's so many labels nowadays of the different, all the different mental health issues. So did they know that were they diagnosed with schizophrenia at that time?
Yeah, so my grandfather, right, that's as far back as I can go. We don't know a lot about a lot of our further than that history in our family. But that's the point, is like a lot of this stuff was like not really looked at as it is today. I mean,
Right.
we used to just like lock people up.
Right.
If you were queer, they used to be like locked up and they would shock you.
Right.
And then, under Reagan, you had like this opening of the doors, because like they called them mental institutions, were like really horrific jail-like settings for people who had things that they didn't even have words for.
Right.
And so like my grandfather, at the time, was not completely diagnosed. You could, right now there's an understanding, but he did, unfortunately, and I guess, honestly, I should say out loud up front, trigger warning, because like this is just like our lives.
Right.
But oftentimes sharing things about each other's lives, we should, letting each other know, like, hey, I'm going to say some stuff today.
Right.
That, might make you be like, oh, let me take a breath. But yeah, so he ended up actually committing suicide when he was 5, or when when my mom was 5.
Wow.
But yeah, he was in the war, and she remembers him running up and down the streets, screaming at things that were not there, holding a gun. Wow. He was very violent with my grandmother, very violent with my mother and her brothers. And so not diagnosed. It wasn't until and then we still didn't talk about it. It wasn't until my mother went into menopause, and my mother also struggled with substance use, and so a lot of the times that she would go to the hospital, they would be like, "Oh, you're just a user, drug-induced psychosis," which was actually my mom's coping mechanism.
And that's what a lot of people's are. That's why there's so many people there's something going on with them, chemical imbalance, and they don't really know what it is. So, they start self-medicating. Mm-hmm. Hello.
And then they want to say substance use is like this, like, it's indicative of you and your character,
right,
instead of actually it's part of mental health. Right. Like exactly. Even recognizing them as substance use disorders is like brand new. Otherwise you're just a drunk or an addict.
Right.
So that was like a long journey for my mom to even get, because she actually didn't start to present schizophrenia until she went into menopause.
Really?
So like my sister started
pretty late
to
in
present.
Life.
Exactly.
Wow.
My sister presented earlier.
Yeah.
So we thought it skipped, and but then my mom in her 40s, when she hit menopause, started to hear voices and see things that were not there. And then because she was, a drug user, shout out to drug users, love y'all. Please be safe.
Be safe. Yes, absolutely.
But and if you want support, please
reach out for help.
Yeah.
Please.
They just were like, nope, this is drug-induced psychosis.
Wow.
So we went many years without actually my mother getting the real treatment and the support that she needed.
Yeah.
To now she's like, I don't know exactly what baseline is out here when we're all traumatized people.
Exactly.
And traumatizing other people. But like now she's like semi-quasi baseline. And for my mom, it was like a big deal to be able to get a job again and go back to work. Or she was going to school to be a mental health and a drug and alcohol counselor.
That's amazing.
So like her being able to do that stuff was indicative, like was only accessible to her after getting the right kinds of treatments, and the right supports.
Yeah,
right?
And thank God for your mom that she didn't give up, because it's fucking hard, and a lot of people don't make it. A lot of people don't make it, when you're sitting there, and I can only imagine because I've never, heard voices like that, but that's a difficult diagnosis. That's very difficult for somebody to have to live through.
100. And like I just remember being at a gas station and like my mom's explaining to me, the little screens that are at the pumps.
Right.
Yeah, my mom was telling me that she was seeing something different.
Wow.
Than I was seeing.
Yeah.
And there was so many times that she would get like so deep into her episode. Like I remember because there aren't even, like, it's so stigmatized that there aren't even support groups for the family members of folks who are going through the crisis, let alone enough support for the folks going through the crisis.
Right.
And so like all the learning it took just to now, get to a place of like the understanding I have. So like at first I thought, me just talking sense to my mom, like, Mom, this isn't real. Mom, this isn't real. Wow. And then her being like, but Mackenzie, yes, it is.
Wow.
Was like unlike anything. And I don't, I come to find out maybe I could in menopause, but like, I just don't know what that must be so scary.
It is
to
scary.
not know if like
and
somebody talking to you is
for,
real or not.
Scary for you to have to be there and witness it, and then have to live with it, and then just try to guide her through that. That's scary for you as a child. Wow.
Yeah, there was like I said, it was a lot of violence, because there's no support for anything.
Right,
not just mental. My mother was also, again, trigger warning. My mom in the 60s, or I guess for her it was the 70s, was a victim of sexual assault.
Wow.
And this is during a time that nobody talks about this.
Right.
Let alone nobody got my mom a therapist. So like that's even what like started this like substance use journey, right? It was like 15-year-old mom, 15-year-old kid, shying away from friends, shying away from a lot of the things that they were like living their life in because they've gone through this traumatic event.
Right.
And like went on this road for that, and still till this day, like now my mom is in therapy. Shout out to therapy, but like now my mom is in therapy. Finally, being able to process these experiences that she's had, because again, I think this is what keeps us all from being able to check in with ourselves. Is like the grind. You gotta go.
You gotta go.
You gotta life.
Constantly.
You gotta work. You gotta keep your house, a roof over your head. You gotta keep food in the fridge. If you got kids, you got to get them to school, you got to feed them, you got to make sure their homework gets done. You also got to like you're a person who's here to create and to love,
right?
So like your relationships with your friends and your lovers, and like it's just like there's no room to process,
right,
when life is traumatizing at times, especially under a system that like we wake up almost coerced every day to have to make decisions that we probably wouldn't make if we didn't have to keep the roof over our head.
Right.
So like that's just like blanket. That's abuse, forced to do something over and over again against your like will almost.
Right.
Like that's just like our blanket. Everybody wake up like that. Wow. Then depending on your intersections and your class and your education and your background and your parents and like all the other stuff, it just like adds the layers of like what's going on.
Right. And then add a traumatic event into it. Then it just throws you off.
And then you're just like, oh, but this is normal because it just is actually life.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, you explained a lot of my question. My next question is, how did your family handle it? And it seemed like, the struggle is real for sure, but your mom continued to fight for herself and advocate for herself.
I mean, I think that's a hard one too, because like then my mom isn't diagnosed, so like she doesn't even know, and then we're just having to stand back and just like watch all of it happen because there isn't any dope information everywhere because everything's so stigmatized. It's not readily available. Right. They don't talk about mental health in schools. They don't like, my county is not putting up commercials for like what is mental health. Instead, I'm just like hearing a bunch of ads about medications you can take that with side effects A through Z. And it's like that's like the only if they can cha-ching us for it is like the way that we hear about some of the stuff. So like it was a big journey. Because at first I think a lot of people didn't know what to do, so we didn't do anything. Yeah. Also didn't even recognize anything, whether it was my own mental health. I too, for a while, thought like my mom was just, was just a user, and like, because I didn't know.
And that's what a lot of people do think. That's what a lot of people do think. Like there's so many people out there that are having these same issues, and not just with schizophrenia, with depression, with anxiety, with different traumatic events. A lot of people, use drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism because they really are trying to escape what they're really going through, that traumatic event. And it's very hard.
So here I am 14, not knowing that my mom has gone through like so much trauma. Yeah. So like for me, I have no idea that this is like a coping mechanism or that it's, or even like how traumatic events in her childhood were for her, the impacts that as lifelong, like trauma lasts in our body for 20 years, science is showing. And so, yeah, at 14, not knowing, my dad didn't know. We don't know what to do. So for a long time, we just kind of were like,
Yeah. Wow.
you know, I mean, and it wasn't until maybe in the last like few, like handful, maybe a little more years that we've like began to tackle it in a different way. Where like, you know, now my mom has been on meds consistently for about 4 years, and she hasn't had an episode. We're aware now of knowing like holidays stress her out. That's when they'll get louder, because even when she's on meds, she still hears them. They're just quieter. And so like knowing what things stress my mom out, so like I can come over and help clean before, or like, you know, make sure I get her my Christmas list in September when she asks for it, instead of like
stuff that doesn't stress her out,
things that I wouldn't have ever known.
Wow.
Like, but this took work, right? Like, and
it took a community, not just your mom on her own,
100.
left to herself, you know, because if that was the case, she'd be left to her own vices. And that's where drugs and alcohol come into play, you know. But having a great support team for you guys all to be involved, and that's what it takes.
I remember feeling so hopeless. I remember watching my mom. And this is just one example. Mom, I love you if you watch this. Like, because I have a lot of folks in our lives.
Yes,
right?
Mom, I love you too.
Like,
you're
Mom,
amazing.
You're dope.
Yes,
You're doing so amazing
Yes.
in life. We are all just human.
Yes.
But I remember being so terrified, like, because my mom would just be walking around the world, you know, being afraid of everything, you know, not knowing what is real, what is not. And then she'd hop in the car and just go to drive home.
Right.
And I'm, you know, feeling so like hopeless, and my heart breaking, because I'm like scared for my mom, but it's also overwhelming in my whole body, and I don't know what to do with it. And in that case, I'm just going to put my hands up, because it's like, I can't, you know, it's powerless. Now to being like, you know, now I'm, you know, so far into it, like I'm on a podcast talking about it, and I get to talk about my mom's journey. And it was long and it was hard and it wasn't easy, but it has gotten easier. As now we can understand these things for what they are.
And that's amazing. That's commendable. You know, like I said, it took a community, took a great load of support in order to get her to where she's at today. That's amazing. Wow. I can't wait to meet her.
Yeah. My mom comes out. He comes out once in a while. Yeah. She's gone to like City Hall to like talk on public comment with me, and when I had my feature for Church of Poetry, they come out. So you'll meet my mom eventually.
That's dope. That's dope. The support is reciprocated. That's amazing. I love that. I love that.
Mom.
Yes. So, did you ever have to witness, which I'm pretty sure, because this goes into what we were just talking about, any mental health disparities in your community, in your home?
Yeah. So like that's just like one example, right? Like I got to introduce how my family experienced this stuff, but the truth is like, so I grew up to be a community organizer.
Right.
And this actually, my road to this started because I'm a very spiritual person. And I actually was supposed to be Reverend Mack well before I was like your neighborhood friendly anarchist Mack. But my question of like what's going on in the world just couldn't be answered yet. And on my track. And I remember asking, you know, I think the leader of my spiritual center, at the time, or I guess the Reverend, you know, like, how do you, because it's a very metaphysical space. So they're like, oh, what you think is, you can affirm, you can manifest, you can create, you can. And I was like, okay, so then how do you explain these like perpetual states of trauma and perpetual states of like crisis and these perpetual states of violence? Like this 10-year-old didn't ask for that. Like, how do you explain that stuff? And they're like, oh, have faith. And I was like, no, that's not good enough for me. I'm too critical of a thinker. And even though I love spirit, I'm hella into it. I needed more. Which led me to doing the work that I do. And so I'm a community organizer. I grew up to be a community organizer, which meant that I started groups that work with like folks who live outside, who are inside the jail. You use the word abolitionist. Like, you know, the truth is like it's the lack of investment in our access to choice and opportunity, into services and into prevention, that like even has all of this existing as it does. You know, like that, like how you stop crime, how you stop violence, how you know, interrupt perpetual states of poverty is to like make sure there's good after school programs, make
Right.
sure there's good paying jobs, make sure there's, violence prevention programs, talk about mental health in schools,
Right.
talk about how to use drugs safely in schools,
Right.
talk about all of these things like, right, really preventative measures. But instead, our local county and this is not isolated, it's phenomena. You can find it across other counties across California and the nation,
Right.
is like 72% of our general fund goes to cops, courts, and cages,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so when 72% of your general fund goes to the incarceration of people who are, the jail alone, right? The population inside the jail, so Sacramento County Jail. I wouldn't be an organizer if I didn't say this stuff to y'all. As you should know what's going on in your community.
Right.
The local Sacramento County Jail here on I Street, and then you've got RCCC out in Elk Grove. 3,000 people population on any given night. 2/3 of that jail are suffering from a mental health crisis.
Yeah. I believe it.
1/3 severe mental health crisis. So that means things like bipolar, schizophrenia, things like that.
Right.
40% of the jail is homeless. 47% of the jail is full of, folks who suffer from substance use or alcohol disorders.
Right. And what are they doing? Using those drugs and alcohol for coping
You feel me? And
from a mental health
so instead
disorder.
of
Right.
right, and then but in this county, a substance use bed is a year-long wait list.
Wow.
So tell me why we live in perpetual states
Right.
of violence and trauma and poverty. It's because capitalism and white supremacy really feed off that stuff, making us feel like we are all by ourselves out here, and like this is perpetual and eternal. It's not. We don't have to be like this. We can be responsible with the ways that we invest in the love of us and each other.
Right.
And so I just see it ripple across. I see it and it wreaks havoc in predominantly. I could go into redlining and racist policy that has disenfranchised
that'll be
people.
a whole nother podcast.
You feel me? Of people
Yes,
of color and
definitely.
everything like that. But
Right.
the disparities across our community here locally. Tell me why Black folks only make up 11% of Sacramento,
Right.
but they're 40% of the folks who live outside, or 40%
Incarcerated.
and 37% of the folks who are inside the jail.
Right.
And then we want to act like everybody's just bad. Nah, we're all not doing well.
Not at all. We need more support.
You know?
Definitely, the systems are
Yeah.
definitely fucked.
And then I could give more personal stories of I had a friend who had bipolar 1.
Right.
I have a housemate who had a housemate that had bipolar 2, and in these moments of having no access to resource when people are in crisis, it's devastating.
Very,
to
very
your life.
Very much so.
You know what I mean?
Very much so.
It can be violent. It can be scary. And when the only option I have is to call a cop or get a domestic violence restraining order or
It's sad.
This is not.
It is so sad.
And so that's how I've seen the disparities.
Definitely.
And I advocate on a daily basis. I mobilize communities to
Always.
fight against
I see you
that.
out there working. I see you out
So-
there putting in the work. So my next question is, how does that make you feel? I know it pisses you off.
Oh,
It's fucked up.
man,
It's fucked up. I believe it too,
Bro, I think I lost my mind about it. That was the point.
Yeah.
And when you lose your mind about it, when you feel so powerless and you live in we get stuck in the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Expecting different results but never getting it.
Right.
So it drove me to the point of being even myself being well, then I don't want to do this.
Right.
And instead of giving up, I found outlets to fight back.
Yeah.
Which even in and of its own, because even this idea of mental health, these ideas of boundaries, these ideas of self-care and community care are still new.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
These words, we were not using them 10 years ago. We were not using them 20 years ago. We were not using them before that. So even my introduction to organizing and fighting back was done in almost like a trauma response. I'm
we got to
we can do something about it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, seriously.
And then next thing I know, I'm giving 60 hours of work, most of it free unpaid labor, to fighting against the systems and the structural violence the systemic racism that we like
Right.
experience on a daily basis that even creates the perpetual states of like unwellness
Right.
that we are like that are thrust upon us. I like half this shit isn't even our fucking choice.
Right.
It
You
isn't
gotta
our
keep
choice.
you gotta keep
It
going.
is
and
being
you gotta
done
keep
to us.
going.
And then we're like, oh, okay, well, what do we do about it? And that's a different. I think you'll probably ask me, right? Like,
Right.
but that does make me feel angry, and it makes me want to
Angry.
do something. And for a long time, I thought. And so that's why I'm an organizer. I thought organizing people together to go and fight together, right? When we go one-on-one, they can like,
Right.
but when we mob in there 50, 500, and 5,000 deep, they can't actually ignore us.
And that's amazing that you're doing all this extra work and organizing, definitely organizing is key for you to be able to do all this stuff and get people out there and bringing more awareness to it and just fighting the good fight, really.
Yeah, but they don't even create enough spaces because then we're coming in, right? Traumatized. Oh, like, do
Right.
something about it. So then we're not creating enough spaces of like stillness and healing.
Right.
Instead, we're like in meetings about like what we're gonna do about it,
And then getting all riled up again, and there go,
And
yeah.
so that's how
and
I
then there
think
goes
I've
the
like
stress levels.
stepped back a little bit
Yeah.
and started more things like, holding down like places like the First Church of Poetry, which is still a very radical,
Right.
remind you of your divinity and your ability to do all things, and that you are great, and talk about mental health, but like it creates a space for us to get to know one another.
Exactly.
And really allow for
on a
us to
deeper
just
level.
sit in the grass with my shoes off and
Right.
and instead of stomping around getting shot by rubber bullets.
Exactly.
So that's so it made me angry. Now it's made me just kind of motivated to continue to like create spaces that
Right.
people
Safe
can
spaces, for sure.
yeah, and there's no such thing as safe, because even when I could like walk down these stairs and just trip and fall and hit my head, but we can get to comfortable.
Right.
We can get to understandable. We can get to like comfortable.
Right. Yeah, no, that's dope. That's dope.
yeah.
I see you're putting in a lot of work, and I love it. I definitely love it. Yes, for sure. So, how do you feel like the world's understanding on mental health has changed since you became aware of what mental health is?
Ooh. Well, I could honestly say a lot. It could also be that like sometimes we all sing to the choir, right? Like we find out things are happening and then
Right.
and then that becomes like the bubble we're in. So when everybody's talking about it, we're like, "Oh, everybody's talking about it."
Yeah.
And the truth is and so in my circle everybody is. And like this podcast, they went podcasts
Yes.
about this.
No,
You know,
not at
10
all.
years ago.
Definitely not.
I didn't know none of this. Do I see that there's a lot of people who still are completely unaware?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think, but that's our jobs. That's what you're doing this for.
Right.
Is to spread awareness.
Awareness,
to,
for sure.
And so I have a lot of hope, and I give a lot of thanks, because to have these words now means that there were people doing the work to find out what the words were.
Right.
And then we have the words now, and so we use them, and we learn to understand them and to not weaponize them, but instead like empower ourselves and each other with them.
Exactly.
Which means that at some point this becomes normal,
Right.
and that's
Absolutely.
exciting.
And that's healing.
That's I'm like I do believe like this, like I like look forward to this, like not great awakening, but like I look forward to this, like people are that, like I think the disparity and the perpetual states of violence, people are over.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to figure out the devastation and what's going on in our own ways. And
Right.
sometimes politically that can have us like on opposite sides of the spectrum. But that's just because of the way that we were brought up and
Right.
like all of these things. But together we are, and we're all at the same time trying to make sense of the devastation,
Right.
because we don't want it anymore.
Not at all.
And so I do look forward to the day that like we've healed enough that we can sit and talk to each other, whether we're like completely opposite or the exact same, in like kindness, thoughtfulness, and vulnerability, without judgment. That'll be the day that like I look forward to it, because I think it's coming.
Yes, I think it's coming too. Absolutely. Being vulnerable and having this space to be able to bring more awareness is key. And that's exactly what I want this show for. I want to be able to bring awareness, have folks like you on here and the whole Sacramento community just having a discussion on mental health, sharing their experiences and letting people know that, look, we're all fucked up, we're all dealing with shit. We're all going through it. But, if we go through it together and continue to learn about what mental health is and what it's doing to our family members, in the community, then we can get the help that we need.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's
Definitely.
So good.
That's Moses, stupid.
Compare me to my motherfucker.